Good evening, and welcome to the Mendel Gottesman Library. I'm Paul Glassman, Director of University Libraries, and I'm very glad you could join us in this tribute to our colleague and friend, Leah Adler. Throughout her illness, Leah, rather than talk about herself and her physical discomfort, expressed concern for others about the effect of her absence on their workloads. In the workplace, Leah was always disarmingly candid and honest. She never hesitated to bring up important issues, regardless of how challenging those issues were. I'd like to share just one memory. It was early 2017, and this library was scheduled to be renovated with a very generous contribution from one of the university's supporters. This particular donor was known to be not always complimentary, not always sympathetic to library priorities, and not infrequently critical of us. And one morning, with the architect, he paid a surprise visit to Leah in her office. With direct and honest answers to his questions, Leah engaged the donor positively and opened a channel of communication for the three of us. One that led not only to very cordial and productive monthly meetings, but also to a successful renovation that pleased him and us, and that transformed library spaces into a flexible and collaborative environment. I'd like to share that to honor and perpetuate the life and work of Leah Adler, a special fund for library acquisitions has been established by a generous donor. Now, I'd like to begin by asking Leah's brother and sister-in-law, Arya and Sarah Jesselson, to read Psalm 15. We chose Psalm 15 because it describes the attributes of one who is close to God: honesty, kindness, and humility. And we felt that the psalm aptly describes Leah's personality, that it will serve as a testimony to how she conducted herself on both personal and professional levels.
מזמור לדוד. אדוני, מי יגור באוהליך? מי ישכון בהר קודשך? הולך תמים ופועל צדק ודובר אמת בלבבו. לא רגל על לשונו, לא עשה לרעהו רעה, וחרפה לא נשא על קרובו. נבזה בעיניו, נמאס, ואת יראי אדוני יכבד. נשבע להרע ולא ימיר. כספו לא נתן בנשך, ושוחד על נקי לא לקח. עושה אלה לא ימות לעולם.
A psalm by David. Lord, who may sojourn in your tent? Who may dwell in your holy mountain? He who walks with integrity and does righteous works and speaks the truth in his heart. He who does not gossip with his tongue, nor does evil to his neighbor, nor tolerates disgrace for his friend. In his own eyes he is despised and repugnant, but he honors those who fear the Lord. He abides by his oaths, even if they cause him harm. He does not lend with usury, nor does he take bribes against the innocent. Whoever behaves in this manner will never stumble.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Jesselson. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Selma Botman, Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, who will bring greetings on behalf of the university.
Thank you, Paul. I feel honored to be here to participate in this memorial along with all of you. Leah Adler was the consummate YU professional, distinguished in her field, devoted to her colleagues, and dedicated to the library's role in support of research, scholarship, and study. Few could equal her knowledge of Judaica and Hebraica, areas in which she received international recognition. She was both learned and equally committed to the digital advances in the field of library sciences. All of us at YU will treasure her memory. She displayed personal kindness and a gracious attitude toward her profession. These are the hallmarks that defined Leah Adler and for which she will be truly remembered.
Thank you, Selma. Now I'd like to ask Michael Jesselson, Leah's cousin and treasurer of the Board of Trustees of Yeshiva University, to say a few words.
Rabbi, President, Dr. Friend Berman, Dr. Gottman, honored rabbis and professionals, friends. I was speaking to Mark last Sunday, and he specifically asked me to speak tonight. I told him it's really an evening initiated by Leah's colleagues at Yeshiva, where she worked for over 35 years, and I didn't feel I should be one of the speakers. Mark responded that I should speak specifically about her Jesselson side and the values that she learned at home, which was very much a part of Leah, and which she brought to her profession and to everything she did. Mark also said Leah would have wanted it, so here I am. I've known Leah literally all my life, and while we didn't talk regularly, we had fond feelings for each other, and I always respected her very much. While I wasn't looking to speak, it's given me another opportunity to reflect on Leah and share with you the characteristics that define her and reflect on her upbringing. I started by asking other close family members what they would say about Leah. One of her brothers said, "It's difficult because she was so quiet." To me, that's not difficult. That's the point. You just have to look at it differently. That was Leah, quiet, but definitely present. We are not used to people being quiet and not looking for attention. We call them shy, socially insecure, but that wasn't Leah. She just didn't have the need to be the issue. She was the ultimate example of someone one notices loudly by her actions and by what she did. She is that rare and special person whom we notice more, sadly, when she's gone. She epitomized for me the fine values shared by my father, Ludwig, and her father, my uncle Sigmund. In fact, I often refer to my father as having been a quiet leader. Leah was the ultimate example of the phrase that we use very freely, but with Leah, she was the ultimate example of emor ma'at v'aseh harbe. Say little and do much. And Leah did much. No one would know that she represented Switzerland, I know this because I was around, in the Chidon Tanakh, the National Bible Quiz in Israel, or that she studied microbiology at the Polytechnic Institute in Zurich, where Albert Einstein studied a few years before her, obviously. A scholar told me at her Levaya of the many books he comes across that acknowledges Leah in the introduction. And as the proverb continues, "V'havei mekabel et kol ha'adam b'sefer panim yafot." Leah had a kindness and a strong sense for the dignity and respect of the individual. And she did great acts of quiet chesed, unselfish goodness. I was told of someone from Israel who needed a serious operation which could only be done in America. Leah took him into her house with his wife and their subsequent visiting children for over 6 weeks, quietly. She also took in her late mother-in-law, who was very sick during her last years, quietly. I heard from her brother Eliezer of another example of her strong sense of dignity and sensitivity for others. Leah spoke at her grandson's Yonatan's bar mitzvah, and for someone who is quiet and not critical, Leah was very direct and questioned the Torah, law in Mishpatim that says, Im chavol tachbol simlat reyacha ad bo hashemesh tashivenu lo. If you take your neighbor's day garment as security for loan, you must return it to him for the day before the sun sets. Leah was bothered about why the Torah would insist that this garment goes back and forth between the lender and the poor person rather than just leave it with the poor man. She was not shy about saying what she felt was right or what was good. She showed a good heart and a respect for the dignity of the individual. Again, she was very much like my father and uncle, totally non-judgmental of others, and she approached things with a good, quiet sense of humor. They shared a quiet and seamless humility, coupled with high intelligence and confidence, never needing to be the issue. This was no less evident than by how she dealt with her illness. She was determined that no one else would be affected by it. Even to those closest to her, she did not want to share with them that she was sick. She didn't want to become an issue for them. For approximately 3 years, while she was being treated, she was able to maintain the same normal relationship that she had with her immediate family before her illness, quietly. Only in the final 2 months, when the treatments were not achieving positive results, did she share her condition. How many people do we know that would have that inner strength and emotional fortitude to let life continue quietly? No self-pity and no need for pity. There's a powerful and quiet lesson here. In closing, what we can learn from Leah is that the lives of the special quiet ones, who together with quiet humility, quiet confidence, quiet intellect, and pure respect and goodness can make a real impact. Her example will be a role model for all who knew her.
Thank you, Mr. Jesselson. Now I'd like to call on Rabbi Dr. Ari Berman, president of Yeshiva University, who will offer personal reflections.
This is a surreal moment for me as the two roles, personalities of my life form together. I stand here today as the president of the institution to which Leah dedicated so much of her life and her time and her energies. And I stand here today as a member of her family, to which she devoted her overwhelming love. In the Midrash in Sefer Dvarim, we are taught, Rabbi Lazar Hamodai Omer, Sefer v'Sayef Yardu Kruchim Min HaShamayim. Rabbi Lazar Hamodai says that the book and the sword descended intertwined from the heavens. The Rav, Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik of blessed memory, once suggested that in addition to the literal meaning of this midrash, this imagery refers to two models of human leadership. The first is the sword, which is represented most by military might. And the second model is the book, which is not about physical power, but about the power of ideas. At first glance, one might think that the sword is a more effective means of leadership, as its victories are emphatic and appear absolute. But in fact, we know the truth that was voiced by Shakespeare, that men wearing rapiers are afraid of those carrying goose quills, as the spread of powerful ideas can never be defeated. The influence of the book often requires greater patience for it to bear its fruits. But once achieved, the effects are long-lasting and run much deeper. Leah Adler was born to a generation, or from a generation, that had escaped from the fires of Europe. Over the course of her life, she helped build a new generation, committed to Torah study and to scholarship, whether as a renowned librarian at Yeshiva University or as a representative of a family that has spread Jewish learning throughout the world. While she emerged from the world of the sword, she lived her life as a champion of the book. Leah directed this incredible library, the Hebraica and Judaica sections of the Mendel Gottesman Library, for over 30 years. In this capacity, she was the conduit for thousands of students and scholars in their exploration of Jewish texts. Through her tireless efforts, beginners and doctoral candidates alike gained access to our rich, illuminating tradition, our 3,000-year-old tradition of wisdom. She oversaw the library's transition into the technological age and played a key role in its renovation and revitalization. Her indefatigable pioneering work in the library reverberates throughout our community and continues and will continue to enhance the experience of students and scholars alike. Leah dedicated her life to the book, and the Jewish people and the world of scholarship has been deeply blessed by her. As the president of Yeshiva University, I stand here representing our community and expressing its deep appreciation for her and its profound grief for her loss. But I also stand here as a family member. And I've known Leah since I was born. And my relationship with her, with Mark and Molly, with the Adler family, has been something very precious to me. I think of Bela and my grandma, and the bonds that unite us forever. For me, growing up with Leah, she embodied a regal elegance, and Michael spoke so beautifully about the dignity of being quiet and the dignity that means and that stood for. Her refinement in class evoked an image of a European aristocracy that coupled with the cosmopolitanism and sophistication of a New Yorker. Her and Mark, together with Molly, were always staples in my life, and our relationship stays deep within me. I remember when I became bar mitzvah at the Young Israel of Forest Hills, that I got up in front of the shul at the bima to do the Kriyat HaTorah, and I was unimaginably nervous. I could barely think. And as the laning went on, I got more and more anxious. And then Mark was called up for an aliyah. And he sensed my feeling, and he put his arm around me, and he stood beside me, and he whispered, "Don't worry, I am here for you. We are here for you. Everything is going to be all right." His words and his presence were a calming and supporting force. And that's what family does. Whether in times of celebration or times of sadness, with laughter or with tears, we are here for each other. And we are here today in the Yeshiva University family, the library family, the Jesselson family, the Adlers, the Bermans, our family. We are here for each other. We reassure each other that through our presence and through our love, that whatever comes our way, we'll at least know that we'll not experience it alone. And that is the calming and reassuring force. We will miss Leah deeply and cherish her memory as a family and as a community. Tehei Zichra Baruch.
Thank you, Rabbi Berman. Now I'd like to introduce the denizen of the 5th floor of the Gottesman Library building, Rabbi Baruch Simon, who is Rosh Yeshiva and professor of Talmud. And Rabbi Simon will speak to us about the lighting of the menorah, the legacy of Leah Adler.
It's a special zchus to be here today at this gathering in memory of Mrs. Leah Adler, Leah Doris Bas Shimon. And when my dear friend, C. Erony, was speaking to me about when the keynote would take place between Parshas Bahaloscha and Parshas Shlach, and we were deciding what we should talk about, he immediately said we should speak about the menorah. And of course, my bar mitzvah was on Shabbos Chanukah. Menorah was a big thing in my life, and the Haftorah that we read this past Shabbos was my bar mitzvah Haftorah. And I thought that would be a beautiful imagery to capture the essence of Mrs. Leah Adler. The Torah tells us, last week's Parsha, Daber al Aaron ve'amarta Elov, Bahaloscha es haneros, el mul pnei hamenorah ya'iru shivas haneros. The Torah tells us about the mitzvah of lighting the menorah. And the Haftorah from Zechariah, which is also the Haftorah for Shabbos Chanukah, concludes towards the end the famous pasuk, Lo b'chayil v'lo b'choach ki im beruchi. These ideas, in my mind, capture the essence of Mrs. Adler. The Rabbeinu Bechaya discusses the menorah. The 7 kanim represent the 7 forms of wisdom, and of course Torah is overarching them all. And as we know, Leah was an individual who appreciated Torah learning and all forms of wisdom. That was her essence. The menorah, the chachma, the beauty of the metaphysical world, of knowledge, of Torah knowledge, and the broader scope of knowledge as well. Lo b'chayil v'lo b'choach ki im beruchi. But being here in the Gottesman Library for so many years under the leadership of Leah and the stellar librarians that are here today, and those that are not, there's another aspect of the Ruchi that I'd like to articulate. In various Sfarim, Sefer Totzos Chaim and others, give the depiction of the menorah of the 7 kanim, or the Zayin Roim, the different stellar individuals in Judaism of Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, David, and Shlomo. And those branches are the branches of the menorah. Different individuals, not only different chachmas, but different people representing different ideas. And that, if anyone's staying in this library, can understand that it's in a place of various individuals coming literally from the 4 corners of the earth to come and study in these walls. Sometimes, in our Beis Medrash, we have a beautiful Beis Medrash, but we see the people of the Yeshiva, which is beautiful. This library sees the people of the whole world that came here. I've made relationships with people from all over, just being in this library, going to their family simchas, just being in this library. And when it comes to having individuals, different types of individuals who work or worked here, and all different types from Hasidim, from different types of scholars that love to frequent these walls. What comes to mind is the pasuk in Parshas Pinchas, where Hashem says, where Moshe says to Hashem, Yifkod Hashem Elokei haruchos l'chol basar ish al ha'eda. And Rashi says, Elokei haruchos lama nemar amar lefonav ribonu shel olam godloi lefanecha daito shel kol echad ve'echad ve'enam domim zeh lazeh. Elokei haruchos, you're the individual who can understand that any time we'll have a place of so many individuals, there's bound to be differences of opinion, different outlooks. Elokei haruchos, you can understand all that. Menei alehem manig sheish sovel kol echad ve'echad lefi daito. Have a leader who could appreciate the different people, could appreciate the scholar who walks in here, could appreciate the Talmid Chacham, the Chassid, whoever it might be, who comes to the new college student who just arrived from Eretz Yisrael, all with different life experiences, and you need a person who could put it all together. Elokei haruchos, could understand the ruach of kol echad ve'echad. Lo v'chayil v'lo v'choach ki im beruchi. The Torah also tells us, when it's referring to the various matanos of the Mishkan, shemen lamor b'samim l'shemen hamishcha v'liktoras hasamim. The oil for the menorah, the spices for the ketores. The Daz Keni Mibala Teosfos asks, in all the Parsha and Truma, the gifts that were mentioned were for the physical construct of the Mishkan, not the solace for the flour for the Korban Mincha. It was for the building. So what does it have to do with the Shemen Lamor? That's not the building. That was one of the avodos that were in the Mishkan. Explains the Das HaKenim. No. The menorah was also for the building. Because the building is not only the physical structure of the building, it's also the ambiance of the building. And the Shemen Lamor, that beautiful light and the beautiful fragrance, is not only a kli of the Mishkan, it's the essence of the building. And that was Leah, the person who made sure that the building was immaculate. I would sometimes have Xerox pages on the table, and I have to go away for a second. By the time I get back, they were gone. Where were they? Because somebody was going around making sure that everything was clean, and everything was proper, and everything was neat. And that's our dear friend, Mrs. Leah Adler. The Shemen Lamor, the beautiful ambiance that she maintained, not only in the interpersonal relationships that we said before, the Elokei haruchos, lefi kol ruach v'ruach, but the beauty, and especially the new building, the new construct, which wasn't easy, as all those that were here in the library during that tekufa, and you try to get some safer here during that tekufa, we see the stones were falling, but the beauty of this floor. Lo b'chayil v'lo b'choach ki im beruchi. Often, Mrs. Adler would having to speak to people. They were a little bit getting too rowdy, too loud. Some people were on the cell phone, including myself. And she would have to come over to us to explain. Whenever she came over, she was always right. There was no question who was right. Mrs. Leah Adler was always right. Sometimes, we couldn't. But whenever she would give some musar, it was always b'halosches haneros. It was always raising someone up, never putting someone down. To understand what the Shalosh says, al tochach leitz pen yisne'eka, hochach hacham v'yavecha, says a new interpretation. Never say to a person, you're a leitz, you're nothing. Say to a person, you're a chacham, and therefore maybe it's not befitting to do this particular thing. Lift off his spirit. Never put someone down. And that was Leah Adler. She knew what was right, and she knew how to articulate it to every individual to understand what needed to be corrected. Lift up everyone's ruach. Lo b'chayil v'lo b'choach ki im beruchi. As mentioned before, Leah was quiet. She had a quiet demeanor. And in the end, when they built this building and her new location, we say it was like in a cave. It was like Benikras Hatzur. It was inside in the cave there. It made it even more quiet. But the Torah tells us, Hanistoros Lashem Elokeinu v'haniglos lanu levaneinu adolam. And the Munkacher Rebbe once said, he says, a person is nistar. We're not going to be able to learn from him. Lashem Elokeinu. So it'll be between you and God. It'll be very nice. So everyone has to have that dimension of nigla also. As humble as a person has to be, Ari HaKadosh says, Tilas Hashem Yidaber Pi, I have to articulate davening. Why? Vivarch kol basar, because I want kol basar. I want everyone else to follow along. So he says, the Munkacher Rebbe, Nistaros, if you're total nistar, it's Lashem Elokeinu. It's only between you and God. No one's going to learn. But Haniglos, if you're going to be a little bit begiloi, lanu ulvaneinu adolam. And I'd like to say the following. Leah, as was mentioned before, was a nistar. For sure, we didn't know about her illness, and we were all taken by surprise in those last months. But she had enough of nigla that we could all learn from her. And I'd like to point out, when her daughter got engaged to my good friend, camper, Talmud Chaver, Rabbi David Brovsky, I was so excited because, I was a counselor in Morash HaKolel for several summers, and here we had this young man who didn't have the yeshiva education growing up that some others did. But he raised to the top, also with that humbleness. And that she pride so much. Her son-in-law, her daughter, tremendous mechanchim in Eretz Yisrael, mechaber sfarim. It's always exciting when we got a new sefer, new acquisition from Rabbi David Brovsky in the library. It was always exciting. And she had the nigla to give over that beauty, that avas haTorah. And in the recent years, when her great nephew Elad Jesselson was learning in Morash HaKolel, and I would come back from this after I was visited there, and I would say, Leah, I saw your nephew, and she was so happy and so much pride that he was learning Yeshiva Har Zion, because that's who she was, and she was able to give over. It was enough nigla that she showed that it was Lanu Levanenu Ad Olam, that the beautiful family in Eretz Yisrael, and I know before every Yontif, when she went to Eretz Yisrael for Yontif, and I would always make sure to stop by to send regards. Lanu Ulvanenu Ad Olam. And that was the beautiful ruach that she bestowed. Lo v'chayil v'lo v'choach ki im beruchi. Unfortunately, in these several years, being the years that I've been here in the library, many of the stellar librarians are no longer with us. Many of the stellar librarians are still with us, Baruch Hashem. But many of them, the great people, are no longer. Many years ago, Rabbi Simcha Elberg wrote a book called Varsha Shalmala. It was all about the people he remembered from Warsaw, who are now in the Olam HaEmes. And I thought to myself that there's a Gottesman Shalmala. There's the Gottesman Library, Shalmala, with all those beautiful people. And where the Gottesman Shalmata, hopefully still being inspired by the legacy that they gave us. And as we conclude, the menorah, says the Ramban, is the legacy Ledoros. Aaron was upset he wasn't involved in all the Chanukas HaMizbeach. And Hashem said, don't worry, Shalcha Gedola Mishalahem. Because your legacy is going to go on forever. The menorah, Neiros Chanukah, all these things. So I say to Mrs. Adler, you know, very often we have going away parties here on the 5th floor. And I always thought one day, you know, Leah Adler, she's going to make Aliyah because that's where she's going to go. And maybe I'll be Zocha to speak at her going away party. We never thought that it would be the way it is now, but we're inspired by her. And so many people are here without advertisement. You couldn't even really know that we're having this kinus. But Baruch Hashem, you see all the people that are here. And if it would have been during the regular year, I don't know where we would have had this event. But as was said to Aaron, Shalcha Gedola Mishalahem, Shalach Gedola Mishalahem, Lo v'chayil v'lo v'choach im beruchi. That is our inspiration, Ledoros. Tehei Zichra Baruch, and may we continue with all her inspiration to continue this beautiful library and all our actions, L'Shem U'Seferis, to bring a Kiddush Hashem in this world.
Thank you, Rabbi Simon. Now I'd like to introduce Rabbi Dr. Schneier Lyman, visiting professor in the Bernard Revel Graduate School of Jewish Studies, who will speak on Eternal Book, Eternal Life, Eternal People, Reflections on the Legacy of Leah Adler.
Rabbi Dr. Ari Berman, President of Yeshiva University, Paul Glassman, Director of University Libraries, Provost Spotman, all distinguished members of the faculty and administration of Yeshiva University, my dear friend, Dr. Mark Adler, Molly, and all members of the Adler and Jesselson families. Morai v'Rabotai, I come not to mourn Leah Adler, but rather to celebrate her life. Let me begin briefly by describing a recent discovery relating to the Mendel Gottesman Library. I'm holding in my hand two rare Sifrei Kodesh, two rare books from the library. A young and pious Polish Chassid managed to survive Auschwitz, and after the war ended, found himself in Bergen-Belsen, then a DP camp near Hanover in Germany. He made search among the inmates and found copies of several Hebrew books which he reprinted while in Bergen-Belsen. The first of these two Svarim is Rabbi Yechiel Halperin's Seder Hadorot, a book published first in Karlsruhe in Germany in 1769. It is an outline of all of Jewish history. It lists all the rabbis from the Talmudic period on, and it lists the titles of all Hebrew books published from the 15th century on. What the Auschwitz survivor taught us is that the Jewish people still live. Am Yisrael Chai. Our history has not been forgotten. The second sefer that he reprinted is a classic midrashic text called Tana Devei Eliyahu, first published in Venice in 1598. It is a rabbinic work devoted to Jewish ethical teaching. This time, the Auschwitz survivor taught us that Judaism still lives. Our ethical teachings have not been forgotten. Both reprints list, on the opposite side of the title page, the place and address of the Auschwitz survivor, Bergen-Belsen, Block 52. Our books, all these books that you see in this great library, are eternal books, and we are an eternal people. Regarding the Auschwitz survivor I just mentioned, and regarding the institutions and librarians who preserve these literary treasures, the Talmud states in a beautiful passage in Maseches Avodah Zarah 40b, Baruch HaMakom shemasar olamo lashomrim. Blessed is the ever-present God who gave over his world to humans and charged them with preserving it. Leah Adler was a distinguished preserver of the Jewish tradition, and she did it in many ways. First and foremost, she created, together with her husband Mark, a family that was and is L'Shem U'Letiferet. And despite the harrowing experiences that Mark and his parents lived through during the Holocaust, Leah and Mark created a loving family and a loving setting for their daughter Molly. In New Haven and in Lawrence and elsewhere, they gained eternity for themselves through Molly and her children, now settled in Eretz Yisrael. And so we have eternal book, eternal people, and eternal life. Second, Leah, as you've heard from so many speakers, would devote her professional life to the Mendel Gottesman Library at Yeshiva University. She was the guardian of that library. It was a great library before she came here, and it became an even greater library after she became its head librarian. She was a wonderful shomeret. In the library are gathered together the greatest literary treasures of the Jewish people. Books, however, have a habit of sprouting legs and walking away from great libraries. Sometimes you can even see the human legs under the book's legs, carrying the books out of the library. Leah watched over every book as if it were her own. She monitored the recall of books that were overdue. There were no excuses, there were no chachmot. Books had to be returned on time. Books are only useful if they can be accessed. Leah made the rare book room accessible to any and all scholars who needed access to those books under proper supervision. When the fifth floor, where we are all presently sitting, was recently remodeled, and much of the open stack shelf space was scheduled to disappear, many of us were dismayed. Open stack shelving of books and periodicals is essential for undergraduate and graduate education. We learn best by seeing a book and holding it in our hands, not by filling out a form to access a book we have never seen. Leah was a great listener. Many of us went to see her. We explained our concerns. And doubtless at considerable cost to the YU administration, she solved the problem. And the 6th floor of the Gottesman Library was remodeled and is now an open stack library for Jewish periodicals and all other Judaica books that lost their shelf space when the 5th floor was remodeled. And in private life, Leah was a guardian as well. One sample that I know from personal experience will suffice. Our family and the Adler family, these two families were neighbors in New Haven. I used to give a shiur on Shabbos in my home, which was open to the community at large. Depending on the year, we had between 1 and 4 children at home who needed to be cared for during the shiur. This was done faithfully by my wife Rivka, who is here in the room. Unfortunately, people took advantage of that situation, and they came to the shiur with from 3 to 6 children each, leaving them with my wife, while the parents sat down comfortably at the shiur. Our house became a nursery, and life became impossible for my wife. Leah Adler came to the rescue. She invited Rivki to come with our 1 to 4 children to her house every Shabbos, about a half hour before the shiur started, and to stay at our house until the shiur ended. When people came to our home for the shiur, they now discovered that the babysitter was no longer there, and they realized that they would have to make other arrangements. Rivka Lyman was not in the nursery business. This was a wonderful act of chesed by Leah Adler some 50 years ago. Leah was a talented librarian, an administrator, and a loyal friend. She was very special indeed. What is the proper response on our part to such a devastating loss? An episode from the life of Rabbi Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook may shed light on the matter. In 1926, the great Gaon and Kabbalist Reb Shlomo Elyashiv died in Jerusalem. He was author of a famous Kabbalistic work, Leshem Shvo V'Achlama. He was known as the Leshem. He was considered the greatest Kabbalist of the 19th and the 20th centuries, and he had been Rav Kook's teacher in Kabbalah. During the week of Shiva, Rav Kook called his famous disciple, Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Charlap, called him in and informed him as follows, quote, "Know that the greatest Kabbalist of our generation and of modern times has died. We must close ranks and attempt to fill the void. I will devote more time to the study of Kabbalah, and you must do likewise," unquote. We too must close ranks to fill the void. We are gathered here together not to mourn, but to remember, not to sulk, but to draw strength, not to falter, but to gather strength in order to fill the void, and to continue to build upon the foundations of Leah that she so carefully laid out for us. I end with the blessing that I began with, Baruch HaMakom Shemasar Olamo LaShomrim. Blessed is the ever-present God who gave over his world to humans and charged them with preserving it. We are grateful to God for sharing Leah with us for some 72 years. She was truly a shomeret of the world and a curator of a great library, leaving it a better world and a better library for all of us. Yehei Zichra Baruch.
Thank you, Rabbi Lyman. Now I'd like to call on Pearl Berger, Dean of Libraries, retired, who will offer at the library with Leah an appreciation.
As I stepped out of the elevator into the Gottesman Library that Monday, shortly after Pesach, the entire atmosphere was dark and gloomy. A palpable pall permeated the space. Leah's presence was always a quiet one, and mostly she worked in her office. Yet her absence that day and its finality spoke loudly from all corners and facets of the library. It was as if the books were talking to us. And this was entirely appropriate, since her influence and impact permeated so many of the library's activities and services. While Leah oversaw the front end or public side of the Gottesman Library, she was intimately involved with the behind-the-scenes functions as well. She played a role in virtually all aspects of the library: administration, cataloging, public service, rare collections, and systems. And at least equally important, Leah was a wonderful friend and colleague and a confidant for many of us in the library. It all began in the early 1980s. Leah, then a library school student, was employed at the library part-time on a rare bookroom project. My predecessor, Fred Baum of blessed memory, had engaged the services of an Israeli expert, his name was Gershon Cohen, who had been part of the Jewish National and University Libraries' Mif'al HaBibliografia, what later became known as the Bibliography of the Hebrew Book. Mr. Cohen examined the oldest Hebrew books in the Gottesman Library, those that were printed before 1550, including the earliest prints from the late 1400s, and described them in line with the guidelines of that project of the National Library in Jerusalem. Leah's task was to create catalog information that could be used in the library's catalog based on these descriptions. For this, she needed to know the intricate rules of cataloging and to recognize what information should be extracted from Mr. Cohen's descriptions. Today, when you find an early Hebrew imprint described in the library's Euless catalog, the credit is most likely belongs to Leah. As Leah's position at the Mendel Gottesman Library moved from cataloging to public service, she assumed leadership of the Mendel Gottesman Library of Hebraica, Judaica. Her interest and involvement with the technical side continued. In the 1990s, when the library migrated from the traditional paper-based environment, that's cards, to the digital, to the online system, Leah's knowledge and skills played a crucial role. Leah's experience in library cataloging, her expertise in Hebrew language, her enthusiasm and aptitude for embracing new protocols, and her focus on precision helped guide implementation of the Euless online catalog that serves us to this day. We take it all for granted now, but back then, creating a screen display with English alphabet and Hebrew alphabet characters on the same line, reading correctly from left to right and right to left, with punctuation in the right place, and showing dates in the proper order, reading 1972, not 2791, was far from simple. Everything submitted to us by the library vendor, the company with whom we contracted our online system, needed to be examined in minute detail to be tested to the fullest. Leah's leadership here was critical. Her persistence, her language expertise, her keen eye, and her exacting standards led to YU's Euless catalog being the first to achieve a consistently correct, bi-alphabetic, and bi-directional display. And while I'm on this topic, I shouldn't fail to mention that although English was not Leah's first language, as we know, with her keen eye, she never failed to find an error or a typo in a document presented to her. And I speak not only of my own documents. As the administrator of the Gottesman Library, Leah managed budget and scheduling. She dealt with personnel issues, and I can testify that there was a time when this was not at all straightforward. When the library was being renovated, Leah had to strike the appropriate balance among the various priorities, personalities, and pressures involved. And just think what it means to preside over the moving of tens of thousands of books, making sure that all will fit on the designated shelves in the new location and remain in the correct order. No matter what the challenge, Leah always rose to the occasion with quiet competence and stellar results. A library is only as great as its collections, and it was Leah who was tasked with making the final decisions regarding what the Gottesman Library could, or unfortunately could not, purchase. She worked closely with Tzvi Erenyi, the Mendel Gottesman Library's expert bibliographer, complementing his expertise with judicious decisions. Her wisdom prevailed here too, as is evidenced by the widely acknowledged quality of the Gottesman Library collections. People, and I include myself, gravitated toward Leah. They confided in her and trusted her. She was totally discreet, and she was supportive. She was a true friend. I don't recall ever hearing Leah complain. She approached problems calmly and analytically, consulted as appropriate, and moved on. She believed strongly in the importance of the library and of her profession, and she brought to them the full measure of her quite considerable abilities. 4 years ago, when I retired from the library, Leah presided over a gathering of staff members to mark the occasion. I wish I could have returned the favor. In any case, at that time, Leah presented me with this leather-bound folder containing the service, the Hadlakat Neirot Shabbat, the Shabbat candle lighting blessings, and an optional prayer, a techina, that many women recite at the time of lighting. Leah said then that this memento would lead me to remember the library every Friday night. I really appreciated that thoughtful gift, so I started to recite the techina after I retired. And the reminder worked. Only now, every Friday night, I remember Leah.
Thank you, Pearl. Now, Shuli Berger, curator of special collections, will speak about Leah's association with the Association of Jewish Libraries, Leah and the library family.
Leah was our library Lamed Vavnik, the ethical and moral pillar of our library. She would tease me for doing this, but it's even in her name. It's a gematria. 30 plus 1 plus 5 equals 36. One of her primary character traits, of course among many others, but the one I'm going to focus on now, was her relationship with her fellow human beings in general and her library colleagues in particular, which can be described in the pasuk, the phrase, kakaton kagadol tishma'un. Listen, pay attention to everyone and everything, whether small or large, minute or grand. Leah treated all people graciously with respect and dignity, as people have previously said, whoever they were, whatever their station in life. It was more than hevei mekabel et kol ha'adam b'sever panim yafot, to greet everyone in a courteous and friendly manner, which she did. It came to her naturally. But it wasn't just superficial. Her regard and concern for people went much deeper. Leah made sure the guards had coffee and heaters when it was cold in the winter in the entrance to the library. She paid attention to and had respect for all library patrons, even those who were sometimes irate, demanding, difficult, and really needed to hire their own personal full-time research assistants. She worked with her staff members and enabled them to juggle their schedules so that they were able to fulfill personal or family obligations, while still ensuring that a staff member was always at the library's reference desk for 90 hours a week, the average amount of time the library is open during the school year. No detail or task was too small for Leah. No idea or concept was beyond her grasp. She knew that the details added up to form major goals and constructs. She dealt with handwritten manuscripts from the 13th century and on, with rare printed books, while also worrying about things such as, well, how would you spell Hanukkah in English? Library cataloging has all sorts of rules about that, which may seem picayune until you realize that if anarchy reigns and everyone spells words differently, it's almost as though you'd have a different alphabet every day, and you'd never be able to find anything in a library catalog. Leah wrote reviews of books on subjects like these, which is no surprise. I sat with her in shul on a number of occasions. She knew the laning, the intricacies of dikduk, the jots and the tittles, as well as the person reading from the Torah, if not better. She took care of, and one might even say she nurtured, our library catalog and oversaw its conversion from a card catalog, remember those little drawers with index cards, to an online 21st century catalog which made Yeshiva University's books accessible to the world. And she became a one-person systems department for our online computerized catalog. Pearl talked about this as well. This may sound boring and technical, but when you consider what a challenge it is when most of the world goes left to right and you're going right to left, and sometimes these need to meet, it's complicated. She lectured at local and national library conferences on these subjects, which brings me to the topic I was really sort of assigned, the Association of Jewish Libraries, AJL. It's an international organization of librarians working at Judaica libraries or with Judaica collections. It encompasses large university libraries, Harvard, Columbia, Yale, Stanford, national libraries such as the Library of Congress and the Sifriya Leumit, the National Library of Israel, major Judaica libraries, the Jewish Theological Seminary, Hebrew Union College, and libraries in synagogues, Ys, elementary schools, high schools, which have Judaica programs. And the organization holds annual conferences, which Leah participated in. And really, it's quite fascinating. You turn to someone you don't know, and you find out that they work at Temple Emmanuel in Dallas, Texas, and that it's 140 years old. Or you meet the librarian from the Jewish community in Panama City, Panama, and hear what's going on in their library. Or you meet the Dimshitz brothers, who are Satmar antiquarian book dealers. The 2019 conference was held just last week in Los Angeles. I knew Leah wanted to go, and I realized how sick she was when she told me that she wouldn't be able to go to the conference and that I should make plans to go to the conference on my own, since we always went together. And I also knew how much she enjoyed going to them. And really, I can't begin to describe to you what an emotional outpouring there was at the conference last week in LA. People came over to me to tell me how much they missed Leah. One person said to me, Leah always greeted me. She said to me, how are the Kinderlach? And she really wanted to know. Someone else told me we have a conference program book, I forgot to bring it, that the first page in the book was a tribute to Leah, and she handed the book to someone, and the person opened the page and saw the tribute and started crying. One of the people who spoke to me about Leah at the conference was asking what I planned to speak about at the memorial. And before I could answer, she said to me, please tell people about AJL. Tell them we're a family and we all care about each other. And I said to her, well, you just guessed the topic of my talk. Most of us, if we're fortunate, we have families. But realistically, we spend the majority of our waking hours at work with our colleagues. And when we're fortunate, our work relationships are also friendships. In the case of the library world, these friendships extend to our colleagues in other libraries as well, facilitated in part by the Association of Jewish Libraries. It's a family in and of itself. It has branches, it has outposts. There's a local chapter, the New York Metropolitan Area Chapter. There's a Northeast Bibliographers Consortium. Leah was active in all of these. She believed it was important to participate in these organizations, to hear what was going on in other libraries, what new strategies were being implemented, to share, to compare notes. Maybe we'd learn a better way to do something for the library. Maybe we could collaborate on a project. And in a way, it's not surprising that colleagues within the YU library itself and in the larger world of Judaica libraries become friends. We're all in the same business. It's not just a job for us. It's a passion. It's bound up in our neshamas, in our souls. It's part and parcel of us. It's in our kishkas, so to speak. One thing family members do for one another is to say Yizkor, the memorial prayer for the deceased. And Leah many times told me that a lot of German Jews are not so into reciting Yizkor, although when I think about it, I'm not really we never really discussed why not. But nonetheless, this memorial in a way reminds me of Yizkor. Yizkor doesn't bring back our loved ones, but it provides an opportunity for people to remember and mourn their families. And there's a strange thing about Yizkor. Everyone runs to shul to say it. Synagogues put out masses of extra rows of chairs, even though you can really say Yizkor at home all by yourself. You don't need a minyan, you don't need a synagogue. Yet somehow people feel the need to go to a shul, a place of gathering, a sanctuary. I can speculate on why, but not right now. But here we are in our sacred space, our home away from home, Leah's second home, the 5th floor of the Gottesman Library. We're here to honor and remember Leah. None of this will bring her back, but it will help us remember her, think about her and what she meant to us individually and collectively. I was blessed to have Leah as a colleague and a friend. We pored over manuscripts together to try to decipher things. We puzzled over German and Latin thanks to her expert linguistic skills, joked, kibitzed and kvetched, brainstormed, discussed many issues and concerns. I could go on and on. I constantly still come across something and I say, oh, this is so interesting, I have to tell Leah. Or a question comes up and I say, oh, I'll go ask Leah. And then remember the stark reality. She added so much to my life. We were blessed to have her here in the Gottesman Library and in the world of Judaica libraries. With her loss, our world has contracted, constricted. It's shrunk, it's grown smaller, darker, and colder. Nothing will ever be the same, no matter how much time will go by.
Thank you, Shuli. And now, representing her colleagues in the Mendel Gottesman Library, I'd like to introduce Rabbi Moshe Shapiro, reference librarian.
When do you find out that your boss is not just a boss, but your boss is a unique and really special individual? For me, it was on day one. My first day in the library, I goofed. I did something stupid. And Leah didn't say anything to me. A week went by. She came over to me apropos to nothing, and she said, by the way, when you're doing this, you have to do it this way. And that's when I realized how sensitive she was, how considerate she was. In the days following Leah's passing, we, the staff of the Mendel Gottesman Library, were consumed with an aching sadness that brought us together again and again throughout the day, day after day, to share anecdotes and to seek comfort in each other's memories. And I remember that one verse, or really a snippet of a verse from Psalms, from Tehillim, kept reverberating around in my head. Chesed ve'emes nifgashu. Kindness and truth come to meet. The characteristics of chesed and emes, kindness and truth, while often contradictory, were both found in Leah's personality in the proper proportions and in a delicate balance. Kindness and truth, chesed and emes, are a description of Leah. For we who worked for her, she was the embodiment of truth. Dependable, efficient, and expert in everything she did. Her sense of duty and careful attention to detail, as we've heard, led us to rely upon her and seek her counsel regularly. If a letter had to be written, she knew exactly how to express the thought. She would always find that typo or that mistake that crept in. If a complex new database was introduced, she would be the first to master it and master every detail of it, all the ins and outs. As an Orthodox Jew, she was dedicated to a life lived according to the truth of Jewish law and Jewish values. Often, in the late afternoon, one of us would go into her office to ask her a question, and we would find her standing in the corner, davening mincha, with devotion, with concentration. She was devout, and she was committed to Torah and the worship of God. Leah was emes. She was truth. But she was also the embodiment of kindness, of chesed. And in speaking to my colleagues, it was this trait of kindness that left an indelible mark upon all of us. This kindness was evident in her daily routine, a warm greeting, a bright smile every morning, a sincere interest in our personal lives and our families. Although we were technically her employees, she treated us as equals, with respect and dignity. There was never a hint of arrogance. There were no power struggles. There was no drama. She performed her administrative duties with exactitude and great responsibility, but always with one eye to the personal needs of her staff. Whether it was a sick child or a sick parent, her sensitivity was such that she never showed frustration or impatience about having to accommodate a staff member's needs, even though that meant a big headache for her in staffing the library. Even certain acts that would not have been routine for others became the routine for her. After a long day at work, and she would often work till 8, 9 o'clock at night, she regularly gave one of the staff a ride home to Queens, going out of her way just to make someone else's life a little bit easier. She would often give a ride to faculty members or students, and sometimes that meant staying at work longer than she wanted to in order to be able to take them when they were ready. This trait of kindness expressed itself in her tolerance and patience for others. Many times, as was mentioned, she had to handle an irate patron or a difficult employee. Even when their behavior was provocative, she remained calm and conducted herself with dignity and sometimes, frankly, with superhuman patience. This trait of kindness emerged during times of crisis. When the mother of one of the staff members was very, very ill and his sister could not afford to travel to come to be with her mother in her final moments, Leah arranged for the money to be wired to his sister, and she never asked for repayment. I personally have a tremendous debt of gratitude to Leah for the kindness that she showed to me and my family. I could give many examples. I'm just going to share 2 stories. My sister lives in a base Ezra home on Long Island, and Leah got to know her from the local supermarket where she works, my sister works, bagging the groceries. When we were sitting Shiva for our mother, Aleh Shalom, my sister was sad at one point and she went to hide in the bedroom. Leah came to pay a Shiva call, and when she found out that my sister was hiding in the bedroom, she went in, she gave her a hug, and she sat with her there for well over a half an hour. My wife once called in the middle of the day and told me that our son had suddenly collapsed and he was in the hospital in New Jersey. At this time, I did not own a car. Or we owned one car and my wife had it. And I was fretting about how in the world I was going to get to the hospital. Leah said, "Take my car." And she handed me the keys. Now, she didn't know if I was going to be able to come back later that day. She might have had to take a train home late at night, but she gave me the keys. Another person might have done the same thing, but what I found so remarkable at the time, and what still makes me think that it's so remarkable, is that she didn't even hesitate. It was almost as if it was that this trait of kindness was an instinct. She just knew something had to be done, and she did it without any thought for herself. The last chapter of the book of Mishlei, of Proverbs, describes the Eshes Chayil, the woman of valor. Each verse speaks about a different aspect of this woman's diligence, efficiency, competency. Each verse can really be read independently of any other verse. But there are two verses in the middle of the passage which are connected to each other and have to be read together. They describe a woman who is skillful at weaving, working with two of her weaving tools, the distaff and the spindle. Yodeha shilcha bakishor v'chapeha tamchu falech. She stretches out her hands to the distaff, and her palms support the spindle. Kappa parsa le'oni, v'yodeha shilcha le'evyon. She spreads out her palm to the poor and stretches out her hands to the destitute. The first half of the first verse that speaks of stretching out her hands to work with her weaving tools parallels the second half of the second verse that also speaks of stretching out her hands to the destitute. Similarly, the second half of the first verse that speaks of her palms supporting her weaving tools corresponds to the first half of the second verse that speaks of her palms spreading out to the poor. If we were to place these two verses one on top of the other and draw a line connecting the parallel phrases, it would look like an X. This indicates that the two verses must be read together, that they are inextricably linked to one another. The medieval commentator Menachem Meiri explains that the woman of valor, the Eshes Chayil, even as she manipulates her hands with skill and efficiency, focused on the outcome of her labor, she will not allow her preoccupation with her work to prevent her from helping those in need, but will stretch out that same hand, that same palm, to help the poor and the destitute. She will not allow her commitment to the emes, to the truth, to overrun and trample on her commitment to chesed, to kindness. Leah's conduct serves as an example and an inspiration. Whether she was balancing the library budget, concerned about the bottom line, or making sure the reference desk was staffed at all times, she did not allow herself to become so preoccupied by the job, by the emes, that she forgot to care for others, to help others, to do the chesed. Yeh zichra baruch. May Leah's memory be for a blessing. To
close, I'd like to call upon Cantor Yitzchak Freund of Congregation Sharei Tefillah.
Please rise. El mole lachamim shochein bameromim hametze menucha nechoyeno השכינו במעלוס קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים אס נשמת לאה דורית בת רבי שמעון שהלכה לעולמה בעבור שכל בני משפחתה וכל הקהל הקדוש הזה מתפללים ביד הזכרס נשמוסו בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו לכן בעל הרחמים יסתיריה בסייסר כנופו לעולמים ויצרור מצרור החיים אס נשמוסו אדוני ונחלוסו ושנוח על משכבו בשלום ונאמר amen.
So we're now ending our tribute to Leah Adler. For those of you who would like to say afternoon prayers, and for family members who would like to say Kaddish, there will be a minyan at the back of the library behind the stairs. And I invite everybody, all of our guests, to join us for a collation in the front of the library. Thank you very much for joining us to remember our dear friend and colleague, Leah Adler.